What is a rat run? Almost 1 year after the inception of the rat run, it is still my #1 question on stream. And today we're going to help you guys understand how to play a big piece of that puzzle. Without further ado, let's get into the Rathma DPS guide. So first and foremost, I want to say there's a lot of different ways you can play Rathma DPS. What I'm doing in this guide is I'm showing you guys what I feel is one of the easiest ways to get into playing Rathma DPS and to get into playing in public groups. And again, this guide is not meant for you seasoned Rathma DPS players. This is for people that are looking to get into Rathma DPS, especially considering that Rathma will be the starting set for season 15. And we're also going to go into a lot of kind of tips and tricks that we've learned along the way at the end of the video, so do stay tuned for that. Regardless of your skill level, it could be useful to hear. So before you start arguing, oh, what's better, Land the Dead or running a curse, that's not what this video is about. So what is a rat run? The quick TLDR is a Z Barb, a Z Necro, and 2 rat DPS. This video we're going to talk about the rat DPS. You are the damage dealer of the group. This build is not meant for solo play. You will not have any way of generating globes. Without even knowing what the Z Barb and the Z Necro do, basically all you care about is that the Z Necro is generating globes for you, and the Z Barb is giving you defense and speed. And we use that little item called Reaper's Wraps, which says health globes restore 30% of your primary resource. So that's how we're getting all the resource that we need to keep spamming these mages. So the Z Necro is kind of leading the charge, generating globes, making sure all the mobs are frozen with Land the Dead. And then you and the other rat DPS's job is just to absolutely annihilate mobs on the screen. And the Z Barb does his best to pick up all the globes and cast mitigation buffs for you so that you can stay alive if the mobs break the freeze. But it's also very much on you to avoid damage as best you can. But obviously super rewarding. The amount of paragons you can get with this build is just plain ridiculous. But to give you guys a quick rundown on the gear and skills, so we're obviously using the Rathma 6-piece bonus, and that's where the name comes from. Rathma, short for Rathma, is rat, and we do DPS, so it's rat DPS. That's where the name comes from. The only thing you really care about on Rathma is the 4-piece, which says you gain 1% damage reduction for 15 seconds each time one of your minions deals damage, so you make sure you always have mages out dealing damage to keep this mitigation buff up. And the 6-piece says each active skeleton mage will increase your damage by 1000% up to a max of 4000. So if you have 4 mages out, you get that max 4000 damage bonus. And that's going to be fairly easy to do. So this build's all about the damage those mages do. And so how do we juice up those mages? One, obviously the Rathma 6-piece bonus, 4000. We're also using Scythe of the Cycle, which gives us a 400% additional damage increase while bone armor is active. But every single time you cast a mage, the duration of your bone armor will go down. We're also using Relina's Shadowhook in the cube, which basically gives you additional damage for every point of essence you have. So it's very important to have max essence roll on the secondary of your weapon, max essence to roll on the secondary of your offhand. You can also get 50 essence with your paragon, and lastly you'll get 40 essence from the passive overwhelming essence. So that all of that's going to increase your essence pool, and the more essence you have, the more damage you do, which leads us into the reason we're running Simulacrum with Reservoir, because Reservoir basically doubles your essence pool, so that you're going to effectively get double damage. And on top of that, the Simulacrum duplicates your skills for 15 seconds, which gets boosted to 30 seconds because of the necklace Haunted Visions. So basically for 30 seconds, because of this necklace, you're going to get double mage casts, and you're already getting double mage casts because of the ring circle of Naluj Evil. So the circle by itself gives you 2 mages, Simulacrum gives you by itself 2 mages. You combine those 2 together, every cast you get 4 mages. We're also running Tasker and Theo in the cube, which increases the attack speed of your pets by 50%, so that's going to make them attack twice as fast basically. And of course, Crispin Sentence, you get 100% damage against slowed enemies, or triple that bonus against enemies affected by any other CC effect. And because your Z Necro is basically constantly freezing everything on the screen, you're going to almost always get this 300% damage bonus, unless of course the mobs break CC, and then you're doing significantly less damage. And sort of the last way we're generating additional damage is by use of Convention of Elements, which, as you guys know, will cycle through a 3-element rotation, and when this rotates to physical, you're going to be doing 200% increased additional damage on your mages because they are physical. Now naturally we're using the Singularity Rune on Skeletal Mage, which basically just says you consume all your essence to summon a mage, and the mage's damage is increased by 3% for every point of essence consumed. So you can already tell some of the synergy that's going on here, because we're increasing our essence pool for Relina's Shadowhook. We're effectively doubling it at times with Simulacrum. So the more essence you have when you cast this mage, the more damage you will do with those pair of mages, or 4 mages if you have Simulacrum up. So before you even ask me, Fluff, what essence pool should I be at before I cast mages? Full. always full. The only time you do want to cast if you're not at full essence is say the Z Necro is just not giving you any globes, and maybe you just procced and you have no mages on the screen. Go ahead and cast out a couple mages at like 50% or whatever. You always want to have at least a couple mages out to keep your 4-piece Rathma up. Now that's just kind of the bread and butter of this build, and that's how the mages are doing so much crazy damage. Now the reason this is so good in a group setup is because the Z Necro is generating globes for you like crazy, because the only way you have of generating essence yourself is by spamming Devourer. And guys, you do want to numlock Devourer. If you guys don't know what numlock is, do check out my numlock video. Definitely give that video a watch if you don't know what I'm talking about. But so you're going to numlock Devourer, and that's your only way of getting essence back, which isn't that much essence. So you're reliant on the Z Necro to generate these globes. We are using Blood Rush with potency. It's again just a mobility thing. You are all about surviving here, and Blood Rush is so important for surviving. Again, guys, you get that like half second of invulnerability as soon as you Blood Rush. Definitely play with that and get to know that, learn it. And potency just gives you 100% more armor for 2 seconds, just a little bit more tankiness. You can pick metabolism, which will give you like 2 charges, a bit more mobility. I've seen a lot of players do that. Now Devour again, we're spamming off numlock, and we're gonna run the rune Satiated on it, which gives you 2% life for 2 seconds after each corpse consumed. So the more mobs that die, the bigger our health pool gets, and we are stacking life here. So our health pool is actually we get pretty healthy once we get this effect going. Now outside of that, we're gonna run a curse, and there's 2 different curses you're gonna run, and you need to coordinate with the other rat DPS in the group to see which one you should be running. One of the necros is gonna run Frailty with Scent of Blood. The other necro is gonna run Decrepify with Borrowed Time. Generally speaking, in a pickup group, I let the necro with the higher paragon choose which curse they want, and then you just pick the other one based on that. And what's the difference? So Borrowed Time will give you cooldown reduction based on each enemy cursed up to a maximum of 20. So you want to make sure you get as many enemies cursed as you can before you cast Simulacrum, your big cooldown. Whereas Frailty Scent of Blood will basically increase the damage the enemies take from your minions by 15%, and more importantly, instantly kill them if they have 15% health. And when do you want to be casting that? Basically all the time. Now the playstyles are pretty much exactly the same, except for if you're running Frailty, you just kind of want to make sure that everything you see gets cursed. Whereas if you're running Decrepify Borrowed Time, you kind of just want to make sure you get a big group cursed before you pop your cooldown. But it can still definitely help to make sure that elites are cursed, or if your group's struggling, make sure you get everything cursed, because it will reduce the damage that they do. The other passives here, we do run Blood as Power, which basically just says you get 20% more cooldown reduction if you take 100% of your life as damage. This happens pretty naturally on Rathma DPS because you are pretty squishy, and the cooldown is rather long, so chances are you will have procced Blood as Power, and you'll see your cooldown jump pretty hard as soon as this procs. But if you notice it hasn't gone off, do try to take a little bit of damage to make sure it does go off, because it can help your damage by a lot. We're using the passive Life from Death, which consuming a corpse has a chance to spawn a health globe, and we are spamming Devourer. Like we said, Devourer is on numlocks, which is constantly going off in this build, and it can help the group. The more globes get spawned, the more damage you and the other Rathma Necro do. So all 3 Necros running this, it just keeps more consistent health globe generation. And of course, Final Service is basically how you cheat death. And of course, the really bad thing about Final Service is it does kill all of your mages basically. So you definitely want to do your best to not proc, because if you proc, you lose your mages and you basically do no damage. And you'll definitely notice if one of the rat DPS procs, because the damage will go down a lot. The Bone Armor Rune, you do want to run Harvest of Anguish. One, increases your movement speed, which is really nice actually. And if you're really min-maxing, the dream offhand would be to have a lost time, because every single time you cast your Bone Armor Harvest of Anguish, it is a cold skill, so it'll proc last time, giving you 10% more movement speed for 5 seconds, which can be kind of nice. And then the last thing we'll touch on is we do run Dainty's Binding. Again, this build is catered towards people who are trying to get into rat runs, or people that aren't very experienced with rat runs. Generally speaking, you're going to get much more damage out of running Witching Hour, which will basically increase your attack speed, increase your crit damage, which will increase your sheet damage, which is very important to this build, and we'll get into why in just a minute. But if you're dead, you don't do any damage. And the most important thing for you to do as a Rathma DPS is survive. And if you're having trouble surviving, you need to throw on a Dainty's Binding, and throwing out those curses, making sure you get that additional mitigation buff. So yes, you will do more damage with Witching Hour, but if you're dead, you're doing no damage, so that's up to you. Now, why is sheet damage so important? You'll often see people spamming for rat runs in the chat channels, like, hey, you know, rat DPS 3.5 million, sheet looking for group. And sheet damage is really, really important on a Wrathman DPS because there are no breakpoints for your mages. A lot of skills that involve attack speed will have breakpoints, and the more breakpoints you hit, the more, you know, cast per animation or whatever you get, and that's going to cause you to do more damage. But with the mages damage is actually dependent upon your sheet damage. So that every point of attack speed you get will increase your sheet damage. Every point of damage you get, intelligence, augments, paragon, is all going to increase your sheet damage, and that's all going directly into how much damage that your mages do. So sheet is very, very important. Now, with that being said, you can really pad your sheet damage by stacking the wrong stats. So it's important to know what to stack, because you can pump up your sheet damage like crazy, but if you don't have any cooldown, you're really not going to be doing as much damage as you could. Now, a good rule of thumb, there are some cooldown breakpoints if you guys want to go out there and look at some of that. But, you know, like a TLDR is like 40% cooldown is probably going to be good enough. I like to stack a little bit more. A little bit more gives you, you know, a bit more uptime on your simulacrum, especially if you're the necro that's not running Decrepify borrowed time. A little bit more cooldown can really go a long way. But as you guys can see, just a good example of this. So I have dainties on right now. My sheet damage is 3.9. I'm like fully auged. This is late season 14, so I am geared out of my mind. And I can throw on just a witching hour. I'm already up to almost 4.5 million. So you can see like stats can really up the damage. Now for gems, pretty obvious choices here. We're running Bane of the Trapped, obvious choice, tons of damage. Enforcer, we're using pets, and pets are all our damage, so of course, very easy choice. Zai's, the further you are away from a mob, the more damage you do, so Zai's Son of Vengeance is very good. Now, one of the questions I get a lot is that based on your mage's distance away from the mobs, or is it based on your distance from the mobs? It is definitely your distance from the mobs. In 2.6.0, that was changed, so it's always your distance, not your mage's distance. So if you can, you want to be standing as far away as you can, but just stay alive. Both of the support classes will also be running an Oculus Ring, which, as you guys know, will spawn that little yellow circle on the ground. If you can stand in that, do. But again, your whole objective is to survive. So if you're standing in an Oculus Ring and you take an Arcane Laser, just because you want to get that damage buff, you just got to be smart. Now for stat priority, again, we want to be buffing our sheet damage as much as we can without losing on stats that are really important for the build. So a couple of the most important stats are obviously CDR, but skeletal mage damage is also very important. So on your helmet, you can get skeletal mage damage. On your offhand, you can get skeletal mage damage. And on your boots, you can get skeletal mage damage. So make sure you get, if you can, get skeletal mage on these three pieces. After that, I kind of followed this rundown. On your gloves, you would want intelligence, cooldown, crit damage, crit chance. Shoulders, int, bite, cooldown reduction, actually preferably life. Area damage does help you in this build. Area damage, the mages do proc area damage, and it's pretty good. The problem is you just don't have enough room on your stats to really gear for area damage to make it effective enough. So yes, area damage is more damage, but it's not that much more damage unless you can really stat it. Helmet, int, crit chance, skeletal mage damage, chest, invite life percent, belt, invite life and armor, pants, invite armor, boots, invite armor and skeletal mage damage. On the weapon, cooldown is really important. Attack speed or damage, whichever one gives you more sheet damage, because like I said, everything is based on your sheet damage. The dream is to have a Scythe of Cycle that's so good that you can roll off intelligence. So you would have, you know, base damage roll, you'd have percent damage, attack speed, and cooldown reduction. On your offhand, you want damage, intelligence, cooldown reduction, crit chance, and skeletal mage damage. And again, on the weapon and the offhand, max essence on that secondary roll. It's very important. Bracers, physical, because we are doing physical damage, invite crit chance. Necklace, preferably you would want physical, crit damage, crit chance. Socket. On the ring, you know, you can do a couple options. You'll see on both of my rings, you know, we're kind of trying to get over that 40% cooldown reduction, but I like to have a little bit more. So on my ring, I have cooldown reduction, crit chance, crit damage, sockets, and then on my convention of elements, I got a GG primal one this season, attack speed, crit damage, crit chance. Now, tips and tricks, guys. Obviously, you want, like we said already, you want to numlock Devour. And again, guys, if you don't know what numlocking is, check out my guide on numlocking. Very important. The other thing you really want to lock down is the ability to force move, which means moving outside of using the left mouse click. The problem is if you move with left mouse click, you might accidentally curse a mob instead of actually trying to get past the mob. And the more density you have around you, you'll find yourself getting trapped if you use your left click to move, which is bad. So you really want to make sure you go into your gameplay key bindings, find force move, and bind it to something that's really easy to use. I have it bound to spacebar. A lot of people will bind it to like middle mouse wheel, stuff like that. It's whatever feels comfortable for you. It's not that big of a deal. Second question we get a lot is, why am I always dying? And again, like we said, your whole objective is to stay alive. And one of the biggest things that can help you stay alive is using Dainty's binding, again, because you are using a curse. So you're very naturally going to be able to keep Dainty's binding up all the time. But you also notice on your bottom buff bar that you'll have a buff called Ignore Pain. It's what the Barbarian is supposed to be giving you all the time. If you do notice that this is dropping quite a bit and you are, maybe your Barbarian is falling behind, or maybe you're falling behind the Barbarian can only do so much. He's going to try to keep Ignore Pain up on both of you and the other Rat DPS, but sometimes it will fall off. But if you notice it's consistently falling off and you're staying in the range of the Barbarian, you can say something. Don't be like, oh my god, WTF, where's my IP? And you do definitely want to stay as a pack in this build. Again, the Z Necro is freezing everything, so that's good. That's going to help you avoid getting killed. The Barbarian's giving you IP, so it's going to give you even more mitigation. You definitely want to stay as a group. The Z Necro kind of is your scout. He's kind of the leader of your group. He kind of goes ahead and generates globes, and you follow him. So it's helpful to promote whoever your Z Necro is. It's helpful to promote them to party leaders, just so they show up as a different color on your minimap. Now in public groups, you're probably not going to be using group communication. So a helpful thing to like kind of indicate, hey guys, I want to go this way, or hey guys, there's an elite here, is to use your banner. It drops a little ping on the map. So hopefully your Z Necro is an experienced player and will have a good idea of where to go and how map layouts work. And I'm guilty of myself. I'll run off in the other direction because I know it's the right way to go, and the group will run off in the other direction, and I'll keep pinging like, hey, we need to go this way, and they'll go off in that way, and then maybe I'll end up dying because I'm off by myself. So a good rule of thumb is always to follow the Z Necro, even if you think he's going to be wrong. Just follow him, stay alive. And the last reason you could be dying is, I mean, you're going to die sometimes. Sometimes there's going to be some really bad maps. Like shock towers are the end all be all of rat runs. They will just eat your rat DPS alive. Lightning affix can be very, very dangerous at high GR levels. Grotesques can be very, very hard to see amidst all the particle effects that are going on the screen. So just be mindful of those things. If you see that, and maybe you are in group comms with your group, you're like, oh shit, we got grotesques, everybody look out. And the more you play, it is squishy, but you'll be able to dodge quite a bit. Now, one of the biggest tips I can give you is aiming your mages. So while you can't necessarily control who your mages attack all the time, when they're first cast, they will attack exactly who you are targeting. As you can see, I'll cast it on this guy, and they'll attack that guy. And then after he's dead, they go on to attack whoever they want. But that first cast, they'll attack exactly who I tell them to cast. And so you need to use that to your advantage and really be targeting the elites that you see in the rat runs. And you'll see me, I'll always mouse over the elites. You always want to mouse over and cast on the elites, because those guys need to die before anything. The trash is not important. You'll probably end up wiping the screen as you move on to the next pack, but the most important thing is to target those elites with your mages and get them dead, because again, as long as you're hovering over that mob, they will attack that mob. Another thing is picking up globes. So it is the Z-Barb's job to pick up the globes. He can only do so much. If you see globes sitting around and you're essence starved, by all means help the Z-Barb pick up globes. You aren't using anything that will do less damage if you're moving. Yes, you might have to leave your Oculus Rift to go pick up a globe, but help out your barb, pick up globes. Because again, we're not using like endless walk that says you lose damage if you move. You can be moving around as much as you want. Another question, and this is probably the biggest tip we can give you guys, is how do I find a rat group? I get this question all the time, and it's a fair question because they don't really do a good job. Diablo doesn't do a good job of like holding your hand as to how to find groups with other players. So one of the things you can do is hit this community button down the bottom right, and on this community find, click that, and you can just even type out rat, and you can already automatically see some of these rat run communities. Like I'm in Rat 100. It's a good community for rat runs. I'm also in a community called Rat Runners. So you kind of just look, you know, see how many people are in the community, and join that community, get in the community and be like, hey, you know, Rat DPS looking for GR 80 plus, GR 90 plus, GR 100 plus. and then you want to put your sheet damage next to that. Now, it's important to stay efficient in rat runs. You really don't want to be doing runs consistently that take over 3 minutes. 3 minutes is kind of that perfect mark of speed versus GR level. If you're running 100s and it's taking you like 5 minutes consistently, you probably should step it down to stay crazy fast. You also want to be running at least 2 at a time. Go do a GR, finish it, gem up, go back to town, turn it in, do the next one, and do all that again. Some groups even do 3 runs if you have the blood shard cap to enable that. The thing is, you just want to keep doing runs as fast as you possibly can. The more runs you can do every hour, the more XP you're gonna get, and it's juicy. And another thing I will say on top of that, guys, if you're looking for a rat run, make sure you have a little bit of time set aside. I'm not saying anywhere like hours, but like at least half an hour, because the worst thing that can happen is you finally get in a rat run group, because it's not the easiest sometimes, especially the later the season goes, to find a rat run. And we get the group together and we do like 2 runs, and then someone has to leave. Like, just have a little bit of time, like maybe half hour set aside to do some rat runs before you even look for a rat run, because it's not fun to replace anyone in the rat run. The last thing I will say is, you know, be respectful of other players. So say you're playing as a Run DPS and you're just not getting globes from your Z Necro. Try to help him, see what's going on, like find out why he's not generating globes, or see what the problem is, instead of just maybe shouting, oh my god, where are my fucking globes? Or if you're constantly dying and you know you don't have ignore pain, instead of being like, where the fuck is my IP, Barb? Be like, hey, what's going on? I don't seem to have IP a lot of the rift. And you know, maybe they could be new players themselves. So just be respectful to other people. And another thing to note here is, even if it feels like the group's a little slow, so say you're doing like 5-minute clears instead of 3-minute clears, you need to take into consideration, like, if you leave that group because maybe it's not the most efficient group you've ever been in, and you'll get that. The more you play and pick up groups, you'll see some groups are like, oh my god, this group's awesome, and some groups are like, wow, this group's really slow. But still, you know, finding a group, putting a group together, it can be kind of time consuming. So is it better for you to stay in the group even though it's maybe a little bit slower, or is it better for you to leave and find something else? That's up to you. But just take that in consideration. It's still a ton of XP to be getting, even if you're just in a rat run, right? Like, it's still a ton of XP. And the last tip I can give you guys, you know, if you do find that group that's like, wow, these guys are awesome, you know, ask them to like be their friend on battle.net. You know, if they come online, try to get in groups with those players. That can go a long way. Build your own community of friends, of people that you think are good at doing rat runs. And then, you know, you'll be progressing them a lot faster, being a lot more efficient, because a pre-made rat run group is crazy fast. And a group of players that really know what they're doing, the rat runs are just insane. You'll see guys, you know, with 3+K Paragon, absolutely legit players, just run rat runs all season. It's crazy. And the biggest reason I'm making this guide now is because next season Necros start with Rathma, so it's gonna be so powerful next season. But that's basically gonna cover the guide, guys. Hopefully that's gonna help some of you guys get into rat runs as the Rathma DPS and learn how to play that particular setup. If you guys want to see more content like this, please do hit that subscribe button. Come over to Twitch, subscribe over there, support me on Patreon, whatever you're comfortable with. It helps me a lot and goes a long way. You can also see we got a new logo. It looks good. We got new merch up on the shop. So if you're interested in getting t-shirts, coffee mugs, phone cases, whatever you want, head over to the shop. I'll unfortunately miss the very start of season 15 because I'll be motorbiking across Morocco. But I get back on the 25th and we'll get on Diablo as soon as we can. So as always, guys, like, subscribe, come over to Twitch, ask your questions, guys. Peace out.